Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Dallas Social Distancing Toastmasters. We are on July 2nd of 2020. My name is Mark Schroeder. I'm going to be the meeting facilitator. A couple of quick things of note. I am the facilitator tonight. Don't be surprised if I have Rob be a facilitator on an evening sometime in the near future. We're going to do that because basically just to spread this around a little bit. Take a little bit off me occasionally, and it would be a good experience for Rob as well. We would have done it tonight, except we were not sure what we would do, if we would have any issues with recording, etc. We wanted to test it, and we did not have a chance to do that before tonight's meeting. So I will be the one for tonight's meeting. We have a guest tonight. That is Charlene Scott. Charlene, please say hello real quick.
Hi, good afternoon or evening.
There we go. Thank you so much. We'll get back with you a little bit at the end of the meeting. There'll be some questions that you'll get asked. Questions like, how did you find us and what did you think of the meeting? But in the meantime, enjoy, and you may get an opportunity to participate during table topics if you're interested, not required. With regard to our agenda for the evening, let's go look at what our agenda looks like. I will go ahead and So from our main website, which is DallasSocialToastmasters.com, you will find that you have a link right over here under the members section for the current agenda. That's the easiest way to get to it. You can also find a similar one under the meeting members section. But if you just click on that, it will open our agenda for tonight so that you can follow along. And again, as I mentioned, if you were to go to the members section, you would also find that there's a link right here in the box under meeting agenda that also brings up a copy of the same thing. So that's a good way to find our agenda, and I'm going to leave a copy of the agenda up for me during the meeting as we progress. With that, I would like to go ahead and introduce our Toastmaster of the evening, which is Lee King. Take it away, Lee.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome to Dallas Social Toastmasters. Tonight's theme is 4th of July memories. Obviously, the 4th of July is coming up very soon, and our 4th of July this year is going to look very different than the other 4th of July. As I found out actually around 3 o'clock or 2:30 this afternoon, actually, I found out that Farmers Branch is yet another city that will be canceling their fireworks. So people in Farmers Branch that were planning on going to see fireworks will not be, along with Dallas and a bunch of other cities, except I did hear that Rockwall will continue to have fireworks. The mayor of Rockwall said that he believes that citizens will not sneeze on each other, so it should be safe to have fireworks. But regardless, for many of us, our 4th of Julys are going to look different. So I thought one of the best things we could do is just reflect on some of the memories of our 4th of July. So some of my memories would be going to the Meyerson Symphony Center and watching the 4th of July spectacular. I always like brass music and going to the symphony, so that's always something that I enjoyed. Of course, there's fireworks. I've seen fireworks in many different places. I think some of the more interesting fireplace firework displays are up in the mountains away from here, and certainly when you're up in the mountains, it's a little bit cooler. You can actually watch fireworks and have a blanket on top of you as opposed to a ton of mosquito repellent on top of you. At this point, just briefly before we go into the rest of the meeting, thought I would open up the floor. Is there anybody that would like to share any particular 4th of July weekends or 4th of July memories?
All right, I'll take it.
Okay.
If I don't hear anybody else, maybe somebody else will chime in after I say it. My most memorable, I actually have two. My first most memorable 4th of July was when I was camping with my family up in Western New York. That is part of upstate New York, for those who don't know. And Western New York, there's a national campground that's right on the Pennsylvania border, and it's called Allegheny State Park. And there's a town just outside of that park called, I want to say, I lost from my mind in a second, but I want to say it's Prattsfield, Pennsylvania. But anyway, it's a very, very small little tiny town outside of this campground. And one year we went to that city or that town and went into their high school stadium and sat there, and it really just felt like the fireworks were all, almost, right in your face, kind of video 3D-ish. And it was an amazing, amazing thing. Just kind of the small town feeling of it, and the kind of the pride and the joy that just encompassed all of it. The second one that I want to mention is just recently, actually just a couple of years ago. It was the first time that I had done this, but I took the Santa Fe Trail and I biked just a little ways down to the Lakewood Golf Course and viewed that right from the path. Just stepped off the path and sat down and watched the fireworks right from the path. No charge. It's right there. It was, pretty wide and pretty good view. So those are my two favorite and two most memorable. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Does anybody else have one that they'd like to share?
Sure, I can, even though I'm the meeting facilitator.
Go for it.
One of the things that we used to do on a regular basis was go out to William Square, and I guess it's technically Las Colinas, but it's kind of Las Colinas slash Irving. And it was always a wonderful fireworks show because they would shoot the fireworks off from a distance over on the other side of the water there at William Square. And one of the shots that I got was this particular shot right here. You'll notice, first of all, there's a little bit of a reflection off of the water at the bottom, which is very nice. But you question, how do you get one of these? Because most fireworks, when they fire, are little balls. And if you've ever seen the fireworks that make a ring when they fire, that's what this was. They happened to open and close the shutter exactly at the right time to get a series of about 5 or 6 that were nothing but rings. And so when they pop, they go into a ring and they make that wide open flower look as it then again starts to fall to the ground. This was actually shot on film years ago, and it is still probably one of my best and favorite photos of fireworks. Lee?
Oh, well, thank you. Very interesting. We'll now jump into the rest of the meeting. I will direct your attention to the agenda at this time. One thing that you'll notice when you look at the agenda is Mark is actually known as the Zoom master. I learned that during TLI. Clubs have called the meeting facilitator role a number of things, but apparently, according to Toastmasters International, they're now called Zoom masters. Mark's already opened us up, showed us the agenda, and we will move on to some of our other roles, which will include timer and vote counter, which Mark Schroeder will be doing. So Mark, will you please share your roles with us for this evening?
Absolutely. So that means that I have treble duties tonight. First of all, of course, I'm going to be the timer for this evening's meeting, which means I will be doing timings on people's speeches as they come up. What I will typically do is put up a gray background when I start, when the person starts speaking. When they hit the minimum time, I will put up a green. When they're in between the green and the red, which is their maximum time, I will put up a yellow. And of course, when they hit their maximum time, the red as a background. Typically, the green will come up, let's say for prepared speeches, typically it's going to be 5, 6, and 7 minutes. Generally speaking, you have 30 seconds on either side for a lot of our contests tonight. So if you will qualify at for instance, 4:30 before the green comes up, and at the 7, when the red comes up, you still have 30 seconds in order to wrap it up. The exception to that is table topics. Table topics, you have to speak for at least 1 minute. There is no shortcoming on that one. So you have basically 1 minute, 1.5, 2 minutes, and at 2 minutes, you still have that 30-second boundary. Evaluators, it's 2 to 3 minutes, so it is 2, 2.5, and 3 in terms of the timings. And again, you have 30 seconds on either side of those. So that's what I will be doing as timer tonight. Make sure that you have me visible either in gallery mode or as a pinned video if you are the speaker. And as meeting facilitator, I'll do my best to try to remind you to do that. The other thing that I need to talk to you about tonight is, let's see, was it Au Counter? I've got to go back to my own agenda. Au Counter. As Au Counter, what I'm going to do is look for verbal crutches, things like occasionally the word so if it's overused, and things of that nature to catch instances where you may be saying something that takes away from your message. The goal, of course, is to not take away from your message, and in some cases, particularly if those are repeated a lot, they do become a distraction. So I'm going to make some notes for those. I will not make any noise during the prepared speeches. If I can find a reasonable way of making a reasonable sound during the meeting without being too disruptive, I will consider doing that. And I will prepare a report of what I hear for the end of the meeting. Mr. General Evaluator, excuse me, Mr. Toastmaster.
All right. Our next duty holder for this evening will be Rob Giles. He also is holding two roles, that of grammarian and posture monitor. So, Rob, will you please share your role with us, or your roles, I should say.
Indeed, I will. Thank you very much, Mr. Toastmaster. My first role as grammarian, I have actually two jobs in that regard. And one is to introduce the word of the day. And this word needs to be used during table topics by the contestants in order to qualify for winning table topics. And the word of the day today is, I apologize, it is an adjective, and it is incontrovertible. Incontrovertible. And it means not open to question, indisputable. Not open to question, indisputable. I am the grammarian, and it's indisputable that I am the grammarian. So please use that word. And if you can, try to incorporate it throughout the meeting if you speak. But again, you do need to use them during also and provide that report to the general evaluator at the end of the meeting. My other duty is posture monitor. And so I will be looking for both good posture and bad posture. This includes general posture, but also any gestures that might be significant. One gesture that people use for counting, 1, 2, 3. Just be sure that your hand is up so I can see it in the screen. Other things that you can use for gestures might be facial expressions. The things that you don't want to do is to play with your clothing, glasses, cap, hair, whatever it might be. Anything that's distracting and not part of what you're saying. I will goes along and present that report when called upon by the general evaluator toward the end of the meeting. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Okay. Next will be our posture monitor. I'm sorry, not posture monitor, our Au Counter, Marcia. So Marcia, will you please tell us about your role as posture monitor?
Not as posture
Oh,
monitor.
I'm sorry, Au Counter.
But I thought Mark was going to be the Au Counter.
The agenda says you are. It was.
He just gave his overview of his role.
That was
I'm
my
sorry.
bad.
Well, now how about vote
Down
counter? Should be vote
not
counter.
Au Counter.
I'm sorry.
That's what happens when the agenda is underneath my window.
Okay.
So let me redo mine real quick. As vote counter, I count the votes for our contested races, and in the case of a tie, I break the tie without saying that I had to break the tie. That's going to be it. So when you have to do a vote, you will send votes directly to me through chat.
Okay.
And I'm sorry for stepping on your duty, Marcia. I'm
Oh, that's okay. All right. So Marcia, I think we already know. No, see, I thought that you had private messaged me, and I was like, wait, I don't think there's been a change. Okay, so, all right. Well, we've already heard what posture
I'll let
monitor
her
is.
go ahead and do the description just so she gets to speak.
Yeah, go ahead and
Okay, so just to clarify, I am going to be the all counter.
yes.
Okay, all righty. Thank you. All right.
Sorry for the confusion.
It's okay. It's alrighty. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. Good evening. My duty as the all counter is to listen carefully for verbal distractions, such as you know, and so, but, and other filled words or sounds. I will also keep track of repeated words like the, and I. Lastly, I keep track of long pauses when they are distracting. Normally, when I hear these crutch words, I would use a clicker to notify the speaker. However, the fact that we're going virtual, we have yet to come up with an alternative way to count the clicks, but I'll do so manually by hand, which I just did myself. So let me just put a little mark there. Okay. And so I will, however, keep track of the number of these types of speaking errors in writing for each person that speaks during the big three, the prepared speakers, the table topic contestants, evaluators, and duty holders. I will give a report when called upon by the general evaluator toward the end of the meeting. Mr. Toastmaster, back to you.
Oh, great. All right, at this point, we'll go ahead and move on into our formal speeches or our prepared speeches. And we'll start with hearing from Mark Sims, who will be evaluating Nicholas's speech. So Mark, will you please share the objectives of Nicholas's speech?
Yes. Nicholas is going to give us a story. The purpose of his speech is to either use a story within a speech or the speech itself is totally composed of the story. This can be a story about his life. It can be fictional at his choosing. And the title is World War II Today, a Backstory. And this is 5 to 7 minutes. So please help me welcome Nicholas Elwood speaking on World War II Today, a Backstory.
And once again, Nicholas, please make sure that Mark Schroeder is visible as your
Okay.
time.
Perfect. One moment here. Perfect. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you, Mark, Toastmaster members, and fellow guests. As you all may or may not know, I was actually born and raised in the U.S. My dad was born in Chicago, and then he moved to Charlottesville when he was very young. My whole family are big UVA diehards. However, a neat fact that not a lot of people know is that my mom's side of the family is actually from Brussels. Something I'm incredibly passionate about is really traveling abroad and seeing many different countries. I've been to over 20 different countries. I've lived in Spain for about a year or so in 2014, 2015. I've been to 3 countries in Africa, Tanzania, Morocco, and Egypt, and I've been to 5 different continents. Out of my various past trips, none excite me as much as when I'm visiting family in Belgium. My mom's side of the family are French-speaking Belgians, which is called the province of Wallonia. For you all that don't know, while Wallonia consists of 55% of Belgium's territory, it makes up about 1/3 of Belgium's entire population. Wallonia has a very interesting and powerful history, yet with all of its power, there was a tragic portion of history. During the Industrial Revolution, Wallonia was only behind the United Kingdom in industrialization, since there were large deposits of coal and iron. The mass manufacturing and utilization of these natural resources brought immense wealth and prosperity to the region. And Wallonia enjoyed countless decades of economic surplus. However, not all good things last forever, of course. The invasion and subsequent occupation of Nazi Germany and the diminishing needs of those materials post-World War II negatively affected Wallonia. This region then fell into a depression and has not been able to recover nearly as well as the other Flemish region up north. This region, Flanders, encompasses the northern part of Belgium, and everyone here speaks Flemish, which is like a mix of French and Dutch. Since this region has surpassed Wallonia, there have been constant discussions about secession from the country of Belgium. My mom was born in Brussels back in 1965 to my grandmother and grandfather. Although they've been divorced for over 35 years, I still visit just as much as the other. Let's start with my grandmother. She's the sweetest and most loving grandmother of all time. I'm sure you all say that as well about family and grandparents. While she is very loving and caring, she's also a woman of very strong principle. I think this really stemmed from one of her most vivid memories as a child. This was back in World War II when Nazi Germany controlled all of Belgium for a few years, and Brussels was one of the focal German strongholds during this time. After, doing some internet browsing, scrolling down some YouTube videos one day, I eventually uncovered that Brussels used to be neutral at the start of World War II. After the Belgians fought valiantly against the Germans for 18 days in May of 1940, the Germans eventually pushed them back to a northeast pocket of Belgium. The Germans eventually occupied Belgium until 1944. My grandmother, as a child, lived in an attic of a townhouse in Brussels while Germans occupied her home for 2 years. She told me that her family would ration food constantly, as there was not a lot to choose from at the time, of course. She and her family ate a lot of potato soup and bread during this really tough time. So whenever I eat meals, with or without her, I always remember her saying that it was incontrovertible that there would not be any food left on your plate as you finish any meal. That always stuck out to me. While my grandmother has an incredible backstory and now lives comfortably in Florida, my grandfather still lives in Brussels. He used to have another house near Saint-Tropez in southern France that we helped him actually sell last year. I adore going to visit him wherever I can and whenever I can, since he is really funny and has the best stories or news to discuss. His story is not that different from my grandmother's, in all honesty. He was a doctor in Brussels that treated sickly Belgian soldiers and eventually the Allies once the Axis occupied Belgium. Although he did not get compensated fairly for what he had to undertake, he never complained about it and has lived very happily every day. If I ever come down with a sickness or ailment with him, he knows just what to treat me with every single time. Not only that, but we like to also go on 40-plus kilometer bike rides in the Belgian countryside whenever we are together. Very, very active person. So it's safe to say that there's never a dull moment with him or my grandmother. To conclude all this, I'm fascinated by my mother's side of the family. I usually keep family history very private, more than comparatively to other subjects, but it's a part of history that should be discussed or at least explored. My grandmother and grandfather are the most caring and sweet people you'll ever meet, but they're ground into really strong principles. It's hard to imagine what hardships they went through as younger children and young adults, but those adversities are what made them who they are today. I take every opportunity I can to go visit them and spend more time with them. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Nicholas. Please take a moment to send a private chat to Nicholas, commenting on his speech if you so desire. I'll just give you all a quick minute to do that. And next, I will introduce our second evaluator for this evening, Marsha Collins. Just as a reminder, while Marsha might be new to our club and we've may have only heard one or two speeches from her, she is not new to the organization. In fact, she is a dual member with Dallas Social, Toastmasters, and DISD Talk It Up. For that reason, she will be our second evaluator for this evening. Marsha, will you please share with us John's objectives of this speech?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. So this evening we have Mr. John Vessels that will be speaking to us in a speech about a time when he was a protege. It may be a time from in his life. He may discuss about any aspect of the protege experience. And the title of his speech is Mentor Me. So at this time, I'd like to introduce to everyone Mr. John Vessels and his speech, Mentor Me.
Clap for myself. Thank you, Marsha. Mentor me. I've got thinking about this, and through all my years of work, really is basically where I'm going back to. Who was my mentor? Now, when I got to thinking about this, I went back to my days at Safeway, my second time. When I was 16 in a high school, I went to work for Safeway, and my manager was John Sims, and he was a great guy, but I was 16. Where was I going from here? So he was good. I didn't have a problem with him. He was a nice man. But I moved to Amarillo, and some years later, this wasn't a direct transfer or anything, but I moved to Amarillo, and they opened a new Safeway, and I was looking for a better paying job. And in those days, that was the grocery business. And so I got hired on to Safeway, and I now had a new manager, John Tully. Where all these Johns come from, I don't know. There actually were 5 of us Johns in the facility, so every time somebody got on the intercom and said, John, pick up the phone, it's like, 5 people would all pick up the intercom and want to know what's going on. It's like, not you. Oh, okay, fine, thank you, bye. Anyway, all that being said, John Tully, I think, was a really great man to work for and a really great boss. And I can't remember exactly what it was I did, but one day, not even 3 months after I went working there, he said, you can go a long way in this business. And I thought, okay. I know I did something okay and he liked it. I guess don't even remember what it was. But from that point on, he seemed to pay a lot of attention to me. And he spent many years, because I was there for 13 years and I was with him, that he always seemed to want to push me into doing the new things, the other things. When you work for Safeway, if you wanted to get up into management, you had to go and work in every single department. And I guess as his protege, because he was always coming to me and telling me how the business ran and what you should be doing and how this goes on, that, it was a subtle thing. He never said, oh, I'm going to be your mentor, John, and I'm going to make you the next store manager and stuff. It wasn't like that. He was kind of just really subtle, but he was always approaching me and would always spend a little time talking to me about how things worked and how he thought things should work and how he thought, and he explained it to me. One of the things I remember that I was always proud of him and I always agreed with was he always passed his discounts on to the customers. In the grocery business, you get weekly ads from the corporate office, and they decide what's going to be on sale and stuff like that based on what they're able to buy from vendors, whether it's Del Monte, green beans, or whatever. When we would go and get discounts from vendors, beer, wine, Cokes, Frito-Lay, those kind of things were always brought into our store by a vendor, a local vendor that was never brought into us through the warehousing. And when we would get a discount, say a beer, we would get $1 off a 12-pack of beer. And they would give us that discount for 1 month. Now, corporately, they would put, okay, Budweiser 12 packs on sale for $1.50 off this week. Now that would, cut down our profit margin some, but they were getting $1 and they could afford to go down 50 cents and still keep their 40% margin and hey, we'll have sales. Now, after a week, it would go off and Miller, say, would go on for 12 pack with the same discount. Now, our local vendor still gave us that discount for another month. So I would mark Bud up, say 50 cents. We are still passing that $1 discount on to the customers. And we'd bring our Miller down and yes, it'd be 50 cents cheaper. So, we'd get our sales. But that was John's motivation, was pass it on to the customer. We make up in volume what everybody else does it. Because all the other stores, there were 5 Safeways in Amarillo. And all the other stores only kept that 1 week and would sit there and mark it back up to full price. And they would sell 10 packs of Bud. After it took it off sale, I'd still say 75 or 100 or 200 of them. And so we were making profit. We made more money than every other store in the Oklahoma City division. We had the highest profit margin, even with discounting to the customers. That's one of the biggest things that I remember him teaching me. And I believe that. I like that philosophy. Pass it on to the customer. It makes a better customer. You can make up and profit by doing volumes as opposed to just doing one-offs. So it was incontrovertible that he took me as his protege because he put me into every role that came up. I used to be, maybe before y'all's time, grocery stores used to have I can't even think of the name. Check stands, and we had manual machines for checking, like a big adding machine that added up our groceries. When scanners came in and we all went computerized, where you can just scan barcodes, he came to me and he was like, I want you to be the file maintenance clerk and you're going to manage all the computer systems and everything for scanning. I said, okay. Something else he wanted me to do. And I took it over. And funny thing is, if the system ever crashed and I called our support guy, he knew there was trouble because otherwise I'd already resolved everything. Minor things I already fixed, and you never hear from me. And he always said, well, if I hear from you, I know the whole thing's down and I got to get over there. But a lot of times he talked me through it and I was able to get it back up. But he put me in charge of every department he can. I never got to be a butcher. That's a real job that I never got around to. And then finishing off, I ended up being, my last position with him was third man, which is just under the assistant manager. So there's manager, assistant manager, and me. So he was trying to move me up through the company, and he gave me a lot of advice and told me how things worked or how he thought things should work, which I agree were always good ways to work. So thank you, John Tully. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
At this time, please take a moment to write a few comments for our final speaker for this evening on vessels. I'll give you just a moment to do that. And Mark, do we have a timers report, please?
Absolutely. Both of our speakers qualified on time tonight.
All right. At this time, please also vote for the person that you felt did the best job this evening for speaking.
And as a reminder, send those votes to Mark Schroeder.
It is now time for table topics, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you our table topics master for this evening, Tanya Howard. Tanya.
Good evening, everyone. With our theme today about remembering 4th of July celebrations and thinking about this holiday season, I am currently, you might see a different background for me this evening. I am in Houston at my mom's, and being here has made me think about the time growing up and what we did to celebrate the 4th of July. And one of the things that popped into my mind was fireworks. As a kid, that was the thing that we all wanted to do and have, was to set off fireworks in the evening and go buy our fireworks and pop them outside. And so as an adult, I see it a little bit different now, but I remember as a child, that was a very fun time to be able to light fireworks. And so this evening, I would like to ask Rob, when you were kids, did you used to light firecrackers, or what was your experience with fireworks?
Thank you very much, Madam Topic Master. My experience with fireworks when I was younger was not as involved, at least personally. That was a fear from my mother. Always worried about growing up, and even now, not just fireworks, but things that in a split second can change your life in a very dramatic way. And things that people worry about football players who blew part of their hand off due to firecrackers. Maybe not firecrackers, but fireworks of some sort. And those were the things that my father really was concerned about with the kids. You know, what could you possibly do that could harm yourself? Now, that being said, every year, my uncle went against the local authorities and collected a lot of fireworks, and in his backyard, he would be the one that would shoot off fireworks. And us kids, we would get the little sparklers, and we would run around with those at night, which was really great and fun, especially for me and my siblings who didn't have the access because of what I was saying about my father. But the fireworks that my uncle shot off, they were amazing. We had a couple of times where a police officer would come to the backyard and just talk with my uncle for a few minutes, and then he'd go about his business. My uncle would continue with the fireworks, you know, and he basically later would tell us that he knew the police officer, and it was just a warning to make sure that everything was safe. So as a child, back to you, Madam Topic Master.
All right, thank you. I spent 1 year, I think about 8 or 9 years ago, in Hawaii for the 4th of July. And Hawaii, incontrovertible, is the best place to spend any holiday. It doesn't have to be a holiday. Just to be in Hawaii was amazing. But that was a really special 4th of July for me, to be in Hawaii and to look at the fireworks over the ocean and to experience that. And so, Dagan, I was wondering, do you have a special memory of a 4th of July holiday?
Yes, I believe I do. You know, back when, it's been many, many, many years ago, back when I worked for a company called Foley's, which now became Macy's. When I opened up a particular store in Garland, North Garland area, it's called Firewell Town Center. When the Foley's first opened up there, that first year they had 4th of July, it was very, very packed. And I actually worked that shift, the late shift, and back then, you know, we didn't close till 9 o'clock. So, you know, it was, and one year is actually really rainy, and everybody's like inside, you know, come to the store. The store is like so jam packed with people waiting for the rain to stop, you know, to start the celebration. And of course, the rain eventually settled down and stopped, and you know, just in time to go outside. And by that time, you know, the store's still open and fireworks started going off. And after we closed down, of course, I never went outside, but I didn't realize how packed it was outside until we closed and I exited to go home. At that point, I realized I could not go home at that time because the parking lot was so jam-packed with cars. It was very incontrovertible fact that I would not be going home that night. Well, I should say that night, but not very anytime soon, because I literally had to sit there and just wait for like almost an hour before other people started clearing out. So we people that worked there could actually go home. Because I've never really been much of a person to you know, go out and watch fireworks. You know, sometimes I can see it from my house on a good day, but other than that, I never went out and actually went to see fireworks. So that's one of the few times where I actually was out watching fireworks because I couldn't go home. Back to you, Table Topic Master.
Thank you. In the neighborhood where I live, we actually have a 4th of July parade, and all the families line up along this one street in the area, and cars and different folks will parade down the street, throw candy, and have a really great time. Last year was, after living in my neighborhood for 8 years, last year was the first time that I actually participated, and it was awesome. And I wished I would have figured it out before this past year how awesome it was, and now this year we're not having it, but that was such a great tradition and for our neighborhood, and I can't wait to do it again with my kids. And so I wanted to ask Mark Schroeder, do you have any traditions for celebrating the 4th of July?
Thank you. Let me go ahead and get my timer started, unless somebody.
Yeah, I can be a timer, Mark.
Go ahead and be a timer for me, if you would, please. Tell me when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. I'll go ahead and switch my background.
Okay, let me get you in the, I've got to get you pinned. There we go. All right, thank you for the question. The question was, do I have any traditions regarding 4th of July? Most recently, the traditions have been around going to a fireworks display. For many years, we used to do Kaboom Town, which is always 4th on the 3rd. So they always do it the day before in order to get it off of some of the times that other people are doing their fireworks events. Then we were doing the one out in Las Colinas, which was actually on the 4th of July. That one became pretty interesting because there were several years that we would go to that one to shoot photos, basically, of the fireworks, that it was so dry. We had had such drought in those years that a fire was always expected. They always had the fire department on hand. You would always have to worry about whether or not there was going to be a fire. And we had a couple of times, a couple of years, where one would go up about maybe a quarter of the way that it was supposed to, just barely off the ground. And then it would hit and there would be this huge drop, a ring of fire that would drop all the way around, quite frankly, the rest of the fireworks that they're trying to watch and keep from going off, while at the same time setting the grass on fire. And at one point, the fire got so bad and so out of control that they had no choice but to stop the fireworks display for about 15 or 20 minutes while they got the fire out, because it was approaching the cars. That's how bad, out of control it was. So we used to refer to it as, you know, we started at once calling it the fireworks display, and then we finally said, we're just going to go to the grass fire, because it was pretty predictable that that would happen. But I've always had a thing for photography, and as a result, if I'm going to fireworks, I will usually take a camera with me to see what I can get. I showed you one of my photos tonight. I still do that. I take a camera and the thing to open the shutters so that I don't actually have to touch the camera and shake it. I've got a remote that I can use. And every year, except this year, I try to get what I can and post a few fireworks photos. So that's my tradition.
Thank you. Charlene, would you like to try speaking?
Not about the 4th of July.
Well, if you, I'll let you see. The question for you would be, considering we're living now in a time of a pandemic, how will you celebrate this Saturday, the 4th of July?
I think this Saturday I probably will go out with a friend on a patio and probably have a cocktail and relax. Maybe I'll watch some new shows on Netflix or on Hulu or on any of the streaming media that I can find, especially since there's a lot of shows out there about Black Lives Matter. And so I think that's probably incontrovertibly how I will spend my 4th of July.
Awesome, good job. So at this time, timer, did everyone qualify?
All of our respondents qualified, except I'm afraid Charlene was a little bit short tonight.
All right. And Grammarian, did all of our speakers use the word incontrovertible?
I believe that Dagan used it and Shar used it. Unfortunately, that's somewhat moot at this point. I did not use it, and I didn't hear Mark Schroeder use it. Mark, did you use it and I missed it?
No, you did not miss it. I did not use it.
Okay, so only Dagan and Shar used it.
Okay, so it looks like Dagan would be the winner of our table topics tonight, is the only qualifying speaker. Congratulations to Dagan, and I will now turn it back over to our Toastmaster. Thank you.
Willie, you're muted.
Yeah, my computer just recognized that. Interesting. At this time, I'll go ahead and turn the meeting over to our general evaluator, Dagan. Dagan, please take it away.
All right. So as general evaluator, it's my duty to call upon the evaluators to give their evaluation and also give my evaluation of the meeting as a whole, and also call upon the duty holders to give their reports on what they found through the meeting. And I'm going to go in that order. So our first evaluator is going to be evaluating, giving their evaluation is going to be Mark Stens, who was evaluating Nicholas's speech. So Mark, go ahead and take it over.
Quick reminder to both of our evaluators, make sure Mark Schroeder is visible as timer.
Nicholas, I will evaluate you by use of the 3-2-1 method, where I'll discuss 3 things I liked, 2 things to consider working on, and then 1 thing I really, really liked. This was a very substantive speech. I noted that there was a lot of detail packed into a pretty concise speech because you really didn't challenge the end of the time limits, but you covered a lot of ground. A lot of this was somewhat biographical detail. You discussed your immediate family, a lot of your travels, so we got to get some more information on you. Another thing I liked, which filled in a gap in my own knowledge, is talking about the history of Belgium and then the province, I think Bologna, if
Yeah,
maybe
Bologna.
butchering that. But most of us, definitely for me, when I think of Europe, is thinking about England and France, and Belgium doesn't come to mind, so that was good information that I was not privy to, especially about their economic prosperity at one time. And then you segued into, I guess, the ultimate substance of the speech, talking about the specific story about your grandparents, and which is when you really enter the heart of the speech. A couple of things to work on is I realize having to give a speech on Zoom messes with you being able to come across with great physical gestures. I saw you did stand up, which was good so that we could see you. But by doing so, you were further away, so we didn't get quite as good of a close up. And then the gestures I thought were generally limited. I did see at one time you did this to imitate web browsing, but a few gestures, but not a whole lot. And then also the voice modulation, it was very limited. For example, there was some pretty heavy detail in the speech, talking about like the Nazi occupation. Your voice could have raised in outrage at the Nazi occupation. It could have lowered, talking about the many sacrifices your grandparents went through. So consider that. What I really, really liked was the tough stuff, talking about your grandmother living in an attic during World War II, eating potato soup. First thing that came to mind was Anne Frank. So similar. And that really, really brought home the strength, the character of your grandparents, and that made that very clear to us and very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark Sims. Our next evaluator tonight is going to be Marsha Collins, and she was evaluating John Vessels. So take it away, Marsha.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this evening we had an opportunity to listen to John with his speech entitled Mentor Me. And what I really liked, John, was your ability to set up the speech. You did a sort of like a reflective time, being 16-year-old, and you had mentioned what was most memorable for you was your second go round of being employed at Safeway. And so for me, I was really able to picture that because Safeway was a chain of stores that was in Los Angeles. And that's where, I grew up. So I could totally picture it, the red lettering and the little symbol that they had. So to set the foundation of like picturesque, your ability to set the stage added for the feeling of like a conversation. So you were conversing with us and sharing a memory. You did a really good job of that. You pointed out the great things in which your manager did, being a great mentor. He was a great boss. And then you went into actually defining what made him a great mentor and a great boss. You gave great details, very interesting, and it was quite captivating in sharing his theories of passing it on to the customer. You gave great detail in the ways in which he did so. And it was actually quite interesting about volume versus profit. And then to really speak to the particular product of beer, how he gave the discounts was great. I love you kind of added a little humor there, and with your own animation of chuckling, which you have an ability to do a lot, which really, for me as a listener to your speech, was comforting and it actually made it engaging. I noted for me, because personally, I'm kind of on this trek. And so what I liked about your speech is how I could relate as a listener. And so when you talk about what makes a quality a good leader, you actually define that in the ways in which he gave you different roles to build your skill set, in addition to him sharing his different theories about management. The one thing that perhaps you could work on is that as you were talking, you were swirling a little bit in your chair. So I was calling to move with you when you were swirling. But other than that, I felt that It was a very good speech, quite relatable, gave some great information and something that I could reflect on as a listener, and when I'm on this journey of identifying what makes a good leader, a good manager. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Marcia. All right, now I'm going to go over evaluation of the meeting as a whole. So first, we obviously start a little bit late, but that was okay, and because we're trying to get things settled in, and make sure Marcia got the evaluation sent to her. And it's incontrovertible that it was a very good thing for tonight's meeting because of it's July 4th weekend. And it's also, along with that, it's also great to get the members involved. And, of course, Lee did that by asking questions and trying to get people to give us their memories of 4th of July. Of course, but I was kind of hesitant speaking up that time because I knew that might be a table topic question. So, which, it ended up being a table topic question for me. Yeah. Okay, when you have really two good speakers, and I really enjoyed both the speeches. They were really, especially for Nicholas's, tell us a little bit about his, background and his family, and John told us about his mentor. They're both really good speeches and well put out. When it comes to table topics, they're definitely great questions. It follows the theme, so that's always great when it follows the theme. And I thought everybody could answer the questions with ease. So that's always good. When it comes to the evaluators, Mark Sims, your seasoned Toastmaster, you gave us a 3-2-1 method. Told us how you're going to evaluate him. Then he also had a good list of, likes and improvements, and of course, wrap it up with one really good thing you liked that that he did well. And Marcia, you also had you as well also had some great points, the likes and improvements. So, just keep it up now. And as your mentor, I will, get with you later about, a little bit more about evaluating. So that's the meeting as a whole, and that's my evaluation. And so now we're going to move on to our duty holders. Yes. Timers report. Did everybody qualify?
No problem. Both of our evaluators qualified on time tonight, so both are eligible.
All right, so please take a moment and send your votes to Mark Schroeder for who you thought was the best evaluator. Whether that was Mark Sims or Marcia Collins. I'm still on mute, I guess, huh? Sorry for that. All right, so we're going to move on to our duty holders. And our first duty holder tonight with 2 duties was going to be Rob with the grammarian and posture monitor. So take it away, Rob.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Evaluator. I'll go through the report for the grammarian, and then I'll move over to the report for the posture monitor. First, overall, I only noticed one poor grammatical use. Overall, pretty good. Now, my findings aren't entirety of what happened possibly. So you may have noticed some other things. If you did, you're welcome to let me know. This way I might be able to look for it further down the road. But I did find some very good phrases that I liked, and I thought they were interesting. And those things I'm going to go through and list now. Nicholas, during your speech, you used the term mass utilization and also economic surplus. You that you can incorporate that in. That shows that I believe that you're growing as a speaker to be able to think on your toes while you speak. You were talking at one point, and you were talking about that you enjoyed either speaking with your grandfather or he mean whenever? And then a second later you said, and whenever. And I realized wherever is fine too. So, but good job with that. I think that you might have recognized that as well when you added and whenever. John, you also used the word of the day during your speech, so great job with that. One of the phrases that I love that you used was, you can go a long way in this business, which is what your mentor had told you. The phrase pass it on to the customer. And then you did use one phrase where you had the verb tense I thought was incorrect. You said, every department he can put me into. And I think you really should have said every department he could put me into. So that was the only thing grammatically that I saw. Dagan, during your table topics, you used the phrase jam-packed in reference to the parking lot. As mentioned before, you did use the word of the day during that. Mark Schroeder, grass fire, the term that you use for that particular set of fireworks that you attend. So I thought that was interesting. Mark Sims, during your evaluation, you use the phrase substantive, I forget it. Can you repeat it for me, Mark? Speech, you're talking about what it was encompassing and the information that, and I'm talking about Mark Sims. Substantive, that's it. And I have it written down correct. So substantive speech. And I thought that was a great phrase. You also rephrased Nicholas's economic surplus, saying economic prosperity, which I thought was great as well. When you were talking about some things that he could improve, you said voice modulation. I thought that was a great phrase as well. Marcia, during your evaluation, you used the word picturesque, which I thought was great. The phrase or term volume versus product, which was in reference to John's speech. You also mentioned John's chuckling, which I thought was great. And when you did it, you had a smile on your face, which was great. You also mentioned this, which I will get to a little bit later. You said John was swirling. So I'll reference that a little bit later on my posture report. Dagan, as your general evaluation duty, you were great, fine. I didn't notice any grammatical errors. Lee, also good. Mark Schroeder, Marcia, Mark Sims, all during the beginning of the meeting, all were great and clean. Moving on to the posture report. Nicholas, one of the things that I noticed during your speech was, and this was something because it was distracting to me, and this is the reason that I bring it up, is that your eyes didn't seem to be really focused on the camera. They actually seemed to be off to the side at one point, and then I thought you were actually adjusting it, but then they seemed to go off to the other side. I'm not sure if you were referencing notes, but that's something that you may want to think about, at least during this the virtual time here. When you're in front of somebody in an in-person situation, then you may not be able to notice or reflect on that, but in this particular situation, that's something that you might want to consider. You used a hand gesture and you said up north when you were referencing the country. And then, like Mark Sims said, you used typing gestures, so good job with that. John Vessels, as Marcia said, a little swirling. I noticed kind of like a back and forth, and then you actually had swaying back. And part of this, I think, was partly you had some enjoyment in the content of your speech and you were excited, and that kind of came out that way, I believe. You used your hands, which were kind of off screen. I can only see a little bit of it when you were talking about passing it on to the customer. And I saw like just the bottom of the screen. So you were using gestures at that point. I just didn't see them because they weren't up high enough. And that's part of what we go through here. You have to really be very cognizant of what's going on with your hands in order to actually express it here. See here, I think it was Dagan, you were talking about fireworks going off, and I think that you had your hands going like this. So good job with that. Shar, one thing that I noticed when you were doing table topics was that you had your hand kind of on the side of your neck, back of the neck. So kind of keep an eye on that. Normal is just having your hands down off of the screen. In this case, when we're in person, down at your side, unless you're specifically mentioning something, I had a neck ache or something like that. So, Just a couple more things here. Dagan, you did have a couple of things with posture during your general evaluation. One was you scratched your ear, and then you also scratched your face. Mark Sims, you put your hands up when you're talking about Anne Frank, just to bring a little bit more emphasis to that, I believe. Marcia, as I mentioned, your eyes lit up. I think when you're talking about John chuckling, you had a smile and your eyes lit up, so that facial expression was great. It enhanced what you were saying. You also waved your hand when you said picturesque, so I thought that was a good use as well. And that's pretty much it. The swirling and chair, you actually did that motion as well when you were mentioning that about John and his speech. That's my report for posture as well. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
All right, we'll move on to the last duty holder, which will be our counter, Marsha Collins. Take it over, Marsha.
Thank you. So this evening, as a group as a whole, we did pretty good. We did pretty good. We had the word of the evening was definitely and I think I was in the running for using a lot. Mark Sims, you had one and that was during the table topics. John, you had a Rob, you had a and a Dagan, you had a and and then in the lead was myself with my notorious usage of and I did have a few pauses, and that is something that I know that I do, and that is something that I do want to work on. But as a whole, as a group, there really wasn't a lot of long pauses to be distracting. So we did well this evening. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
All right, thank you, Marsha. All right, so that's going to include the general evaluation section of the meeting. So now it's time to vote for the best of the big three, which is going to be our Toastmaster, Lee King, our table topic master, Tanya Howard, or me as general evaluator, Dagan Newland. And remember, send your votes to Mark Schroeder. And now I will turn it over to our new president, and his first time as president and on our Zoom meetings, Mark Sims.
Thank you very much. And I'm honored to be president for the term that starts tonight. And we're off to a good start. It's always nice to have a guest. So starters, Charlene, I'd like to get a little bit of information from you, and thank you again for attending. But how did you find out about us?
So I'm familiar with Toastmasters. I've participated in the past in the North Dallas area. I just don't remember which one. And Tanya and I are longtime friends, and so she mentioned this meeting to me, and I decided to join. And I thought I'd like to become a member, but I thought you all meant monthly, not weekly.
Oh.
So hence the reason why I thought that the distance driving, once you all actually meet in person, would be a little bit too much for me.
Great, understand. Well, what were your thoughts about the meeting? Any impression?
Yeah, I thought that it's great the way that you're making this work via Zoom, and the timer method of red, yellow, green, or green, red, yellow, red, I think is a really good way of subtly letting people know when they're getting out of time. I don't quite understand why you have to talk for a minute if you've finished your thought. That's just my personal opinion. Other than that, I think the meeting is going pretty well from my perspective as a newbie via Zoom.
Well, thank you again for attending. Please join in anytime. And I understand you're quite a ways away. But if you ever want to consider being a member, then please do let us know. I mean, it's definitely, that's our goal, to bring in a lot of people. The more people, the more fun. Thank you.
Is there an option to attend monthly?
You could, if that's the most that you could commit to in line with your schedule. We have some folks that we don't get to see as much of them as we would like, but if we know that up front, then we'll just give you as many opportunities as we can when you're able to make it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Mark. I was going to say, we have people who have jobs that have a Thursday meeting every once in a while or on a regular basis other than ours. You don't have to be here every week. You can be here as often as you can be here, as often as you choose to. It's not a requirement. So it's a matter of how you want to work the program. It's also true that we're probably going to be online for some amount of time. And if necessary, you could join us for a while and consider moving your membership if you needed to at a later date. But at the moment, we think we're going to be stuck online for a little while with what's happening in Dallas County.
Okay, great.
And actually, I was also going to say that for right now, we're running a special. So since you would be reinstate, the dues would only be $30, and that would cover you through the end of September, at which point all of us officers would have to reevaluate dues and everything at that point as far as where we're at in the whole social distancing as far as meeting. So even if you wanted to commit to something through the end of September, you can just pay the $30 and join. That would be another option.
Okay.
And then the other thing I was just going to tell you, as far as the minute for table topics, that's actually a rule by Toastmasters International that you have to speak for a minimum of 1 minute. That comes directly from the Toastmasters speech contest rule book.
Okay. In a business meeting, there's no standard to talk for a minute. You need to say what you have to say. As a matter of fact, you don't want people usurping their time and talking unnecessarily. I was just curious.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think more than anything else in Toastmasters, it really is intended to engender an idea of don't try to get out too easy. It is more typical for people to overspeak than underspeak, or if your project is supposed to be 5 to 7 and you only do 2 to 3, that's not a problem as long as you don't do it all the time. But of course, if the project is 5 to 7 and you always come in and do 2 to 3, then we're wondering if you're really working the program right and all. So it's a guideline, but you're right. Occasionally it does happen, and occasionally people just need to go over as well. It's also been very typical for somebody to have a 5 to 7 minute speech and say, I need 6 to 8, and just do it because they've already got it prepared and they know exactly what they need to say, or maybe shorten it. Yeah, it does happen.
Thank you. So who do I need to contact about joining? Mark Schroeder or?
That's going to be Dagan Newland is the person who he's our treasurer, so he will be one of the people who will work with you from that standpoint. But you can work with any of the rest of us on the logistics, any of the other logistics of what, how our meetings go, and is this really the way it's going to be and for how long? Because a lot of us will have opinions on that. But yeah, with regard to the actual application, that would be Dagan Newland.
Yeah, and if you want to send me a private chat with your email, I can send you an email with the info that I need.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Next point I want to make is Toastmasters Leadership Institute, TLI. I joined the Zoom meeting on Saturday. I know you did, Lee, because I saw you on screen. And Rob, I'm pretty sure I saw a chat message from you during the process. So at least 3 of us did.
Make it 4. I was there as well.
You was there. Okay, so I think that gets the minimum we need to get DC Distinguished Club Program points, but obviously having all the officers participating in the TLI would be best because you get to see some other people, you learn some things. So the rest of y'all, please go on the District 50 Toastmasters website to find out the time of the next sessions, and in order to be able to be well equipped to perform your officer roles. And speaking of officers, once we're done with the regular meeting, if I could meet with y'all at least, I hope I could keep it really short, maybe at least for 5 minutes, and go over, hopefully we can go over a couple of things quickly. And with that, I don't know any other business we have other than finding out the winners tonight.
Well, we do have at least one other small piece of business. This is Mark Schroeder again. I was tasked with talking with Ozonas to find out, well, to at least inform them that we were not planning on coming back for the month of July with what's going on, and see what they said about that. What I got was, thanks for the update. We are doing good and hanging in there. Patio is keeping us afloat. Thanks, and stay safe out there. So that was from Corey, the manager at Ozona Grill. Apparently the patio is helping them a lot, and especially if they end up closing down indoor dining again. They certainly reduced it back to 50% again in Dallas. So that was the response from them. There was no, we're going to sell this place out from underneath you yet, or anything of that nature. So I think we're probably at least good for another month without going back. Shall we go ahead and do the rewards then?
Yes, please do. I'll rejoin this at the officers meeting.
Okay. With regard to the awards tonight, our first award, I'm going to go ahead and do table topics. Table topics, it is unusual that we only have one person qualify, but that's the way it worked out tonight. So congratulations to Dagon, the only person who managed to get both the timing requirement and the word of the day. Our best speaker tonight was Nicholas Elwood. Congratulations, Nicholas. Our best evaluator tonight, we had 2 evaluators, one for each of our speeches, and our best evaluator goes to Mark Sims. Congratulations, Mark. And finally, but not at all to diminish it, the best of our big 3 tonight goes to Tanya Howard for table topics. Thank you so much, Tanya. That concludes the awards for tonight.
Thank you. And with that, we can close out on the regular meeting. And so if you need to leave, feel free to do so. And for the officers, please stay behind for a few minutes. And actually, if you're a non-officer and you just wanted to listen in, you'd be welcome to. But thank you all for attending, and have a great weekend.
Good night.
Happy 4th of July.
No.
Megan, can I set up a Zoom meeting with you?
Just real quick before you do that, as a meeting coordinator, I'm going to stop the recording. 3, 2, 1.